Welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. I do my very best on this channel to help lead you guys in the right direction or give you a lot of the knowledge or the tactics or the thought process that I'm going through on any given day. And I think if you guys have been listening to this channel long enough, you've now come to understand that, my thought process is always changing and so should yours. But with that said, still the fundamentals of the hobby stays the same. And I don't want to just flat out tell you guys, like, this is the card I think you should buy. This is the set I think you should buy. Because I think that's disingenuous for not just myself, but for you and for a lot of other people in the hobby. Plus, it's not fair because then it makes it sound like you guys don't already know a lot of this stuff. And I think a lot of you guys already know most of this information. But I still do want to use this channel as a platform to help educate some of the people that might not know. So for some of you guys out there, you might be listening to this video and you're going to say, well, I know a lot of this information. Maybe some of you guys out there will be listening and saying, stop talking right now because you're about to give out some, don't call it secreted information, but closely held tight information. And then there's some other guys out there who might take this information and will really help you grow in the hobby. Sometimes I think about this hobby as just as if you were standing at a crossroads of some super busy street in some super busy city, whether it's New York City or some real populous city near where you live. And you got a bunch of people going by their daily routines, their day-to-day, just going a million miles per hour. They don't care about anything else going on. And as you're trying to stand there on this busy street corner, the crowd eventually just starts moving you until you start walking with them. And all that means is you end up just going with the crowd. And I feel that same sort of situation happens with Pokemon, where you have people that are standing at crossroads and they really want to start making hard decisions and think about what they're doing, but they end up just getting swept away by the crowd. And it's okay to go with the crowd a little bit because I think there's a lot of opportunities. There's a reason why the crowd is leading in certain directions. And I think when you follow the crowd, sometimes you're chasing or you're following like that really, easy money or really easy sets. Mainly I'm thinking about like modern in this situation or stuff that might not hold extreme long-term value when it comes to more like the single market. Yeah, maybe sealed product will be okay. But like I said, it's easy to get swept away and just carried away by that crowd. And next thing you know, you're walking a million miles per hour and you just get lost. Or you have a second option. You could push back against that crowd. Maybe you get some people yelling at you along the way, but then you can go the other direction. Go in the path of travel that not everybody is going. And for this hobby, I think that's vintage. But then when it comes to vintage, there's also the same crossroads, whether people realize it exists in the vintage market or not. You have the vintage area that the crowd is going, or again, you can still do that same pushback. And for a lot of people for vintage, they think WotC, and that's fine. And the sets I'm going to talk about are in WotC. But when people think vintage, they instantly just think like base set, jungle, fossil, Team Rocket, the Neos, the gym sets. That's what people think. People don't realize that there still are some like really niche sets within WotC. And just like one set to think about. First of all, 2002, 2003. If you guys are going to want to start digging into some sets, those are maybe the years you want to look at. But just think of a set like Aquapolis. There's a reason why you probably don't have a ton of Aquapolis cards. Because the print runs, for everything that I understand about print runs, we're very low for those type of sets. Skyridge being even lower than Aquapolis, but Aquapolis, there's a reason why it's still a WotC set, and you never see product being opened, and you rarely see cards from that set really being talked about on a very mainstream level. Sure, you want to talk about vintage and you want to talk about base set, all those cards are extremely mainstream. Charizard obviously sticking out like out of every card in the history of this hobby. But every card within a lot of those, call them vintage WotC sets, yeah, they're super popular. But there's a reason why a lot of like the Aquapolis cards and stuff are not super popular. And that's because the supply is so low. But if you want to go and start to find areas of the hobby, you got to start moving to where the supply is low. And still keeping in mind that condition is very important when you're collecting cards. But you think about a set like Aquapolis, you just have to really start to tackle one card at a time, because there's not a crazy lot of people going after these sets. And probably not going after Aquapolis because it's such a large set. It does have a lot of high dollar amount cards in it. It's the first time we saw like crystal cards. First time you saw crystal, but then you have like the crystal Lugia and stuff. Like, you got some big hard hitter cards in there, but there's still a lot of like fun collectability and still some really cheap cards in that set that are easily attainable, especially cards that have awesome artwork to it. That's a beautiful thing about finding still the cheap cards. And one of the cards in this set that is very affordable, which is on my top 10 all-time card list of favorite artwork, is like the Hypnos in this set. And if you guys aren't familiar with the Hypno, that's fine. He's sitting outside a window, and you have somebody sleeping at their desk. And as they're sleeping, Hypno's just eating their dreams. And I always thought that this artwork was just phenomenal. And that's why it's like one of my top 10 favorite artworks. Because I love artwork like this, where Hypno's eating the guy's dreams. Because it's able to tell a story, but then let you write the rest, You can write like, what was that guy dreaming about? Was he having like a good dream? Was it a nightmare? Like, how is Hypno eating his dreams, like affecting this guy as a person? Like, what are the long-term effects? All this stuff, right? You can almost write a novel just about this one card. And you're able to build this scene in your head around one single piece of artwork on one single card from one single set that's one of the largest sets in the history of Pokemon. That's why this hobby is still so awesome. And this is what I want you guys to, really start to do, is start to dive into these sets. And you don't have to go after the very expensive cards. You can just go after the cards you enjoy, the cards you like, and then continue to branch off within that set. The more familiarized you get with these sets, with these cards. And there's a big reason almost 100% of all people that give good advice, the first advice I'll always give you is collect what you love first and then worry about everything else. And, collecting what you love first is such a great, jumping point. Like in this set, I'm not a huge Houndoom fan, but I like both of the artworks for this. You have the one Houndoom where he's like blowing fire. Like, I don't even have these photos of the cards in front of me, but the images are so burned into my mind where he's blowing fire, and it just like brings up like almost a thought of like the devil, and just it really is super iconic Houndoom artwork. And I think the the artist's ability to draw this card and express a lot of emotions is fantastic. And I think that's why it's one of the best Houndoom artworks in the history of this hobby. And then even the other one where Houndoom is kind of sitting on that, I don't know if it's like a broken tree or a mountain, because you can see the two trees on the side of him. But then you see him, he's like almost sad, right? So you got like the one artwork, which is such a complete opposite of just strong fire, doom, like gives you thoughts of like the devil, like that's how well that artwork is drawn. And then you have the total polarizing effect of this artwork, where now you have Houndoom and he's sitting alone on top of this mountain by himself, and there's barely enough room for him to even sit. And it's as if he's going to fall. And you see this like super strong character, almost what it appears to be at its weakest moment. And you can see his head is held down, and you don't know the thoughts that are going through his head, but you can tell like this Pokemon is really going through a lot in this scene. So it's amazing how you can have two cards that are exactly the same character in exactly the same set. These cards are back to back, like numbered in the set. And the stories that each one of these artworks tell are so polarizing between the two of them. And, just because I tell the story of how I imagine the artwork could be different than the way you imagine it, could be different than the way a different person imagines it. But again, that just brings us back to collecting what you love. And that's why it's so important for this hobby to do that. So, just start to think about this stuff. And I've said it in so many other videos. It's really important that you guys start to dive into a lot of these older sets, vintage. And Aquapolis is just one set from one time period. And that's the beautiful thing about Pokemon going back in time and collecting vintage stuff. There's so many different sets out there on so many different time periods. It would be almost impossible to become an expert in every set, to understand every card. But if you want to go there and, start unwrapping these sets and start, maybe you're experiencing them for the first time, or maybe you're rediscovering them. Whatever it is, you can still have a lot of fun in this hobby, and there's so much room in these sets. And eventually you'll see a lot of people, and I've always thought this, eventually you'll see a lot of people move into a lot of these vintage sets. And I think that's where the most untapped potential is, and the greatest room for growth for this hobby, which is ironic, right? You think growth of this hobby is the continuation of modern, and yeah, that's a huge part. But I think the true continuation of this hobby is to remember like vintage and remember where you came from. And then by using your knowledge of where you came from, you have a better ability to predict the future. And I think that's why this hobby is just fantastic. And I love this hobby so much. And I hope you guys do love this hobby. And I hope you guys are enjoying this channel. But listen, I've said it in probably 50 other videos. If you somehow made it to the end of this video and you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Other than that, hit the like button. Helps me out a lot. And other than that, I'll catch you guys on the next video.